Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at some older abilities that once existed within Overwatch but have been altered or removed from the game altogether. We're mainly going to look at the ability, how it changed the hero, and how it affected the game, and what we miss or maybe don't miss about the ability. This will be a blast from the past or informative depending if you're a new or old player, and if you do enjoy the video then why not hit the like button, subscribe for some future content, and let's get straight into the list. Okay, so let's start with a spicy one. First up, we're going to be taking a look at the infamous scatter shot that once existed in Hanzo's kit and was shown off in the Overwatch short Dragons. This ability would shoot an arrow that would scatter into multiple arrows once it hit an object or a target, and to be more specific, the single arrow would split into 6 different ones. Each could do 22 to 75 damage per arrow. The max damage was 450, which is what honestly made this so insane. That, coupled with its raw RNG, was just way too much for most players, and no one really liked facing off against it. Starting this video off on a positive note, there was some things to like about the ability, and by some, I kind of just mean one thing. If you were a Hanzo player with good prediction and sent off a scatter arrow that bounced off of the wall in a room and hit the enemy that you predicted, it was very satisfying, and honestly, in those cases it was fun to use. However, besides that, the rest was pretty bad. The biggest flaw was the ability to shoot the arrow at the enemy's feet, and it would always scatter upwards, meaning you could very easily hit all 450 damage almost every time with just barely a little bit of practice. Meaning you could one-shot basically anyone besides a select few tanks, and you could do this every 10 seconds, which was its cooldown. It was insane, and for the longest time it was regarded as one of the most overpowered abilities in the game. Now, if that wasn't bad enough for you, things only got worse. There was the fact that Scatter Arrow would often go flying and bounce over and over in a room and then randomly hit an enemy. It had a lot of RNG, and you could snag random kills without even realizing it. And while this was funny in the moment, it's pretty unhealthy for a game in retrospect. All of us know, however, this was later replaced with Storm Arrows. Hanzo still fires 6 arrows, but in rapid succession now, and the overall damage output on the body shots is 420, making it still very powerful. The biggest difference is you simply have to aim each shot now and keep up with whatever enemy you're targeting. In the end, this change made the good Hanzo players stronger, and the less talented ones a little bit weaker. Anyways, that's enough about Hanzo. Next up, we'll dive further back in time when Pharah had the ability to use her Concussive Blast, which is her E ability, in order to deal tons of damage to shields, sometimes completely breaking them right on the spot. This was only implemented during a very short period in the alpha stages of Overwatch and was removed quickly because of how overpowered it was. Pharah already had movement advantage to get around shields, going over or literally maybe around them, but imagine her just breaking them all together. This one is pretty self-explanatory as it was just unhealthy for the game, and Blizzard realized that very quickly. Alrighty, moving from there, we'll be taking a look at arguably the most missed ability in the game. This one has to go to the one and only original Mercy ultimate. For those who don't know, this was when Mercy dived in and could resurrect an entire team by pressing Q. This was honestly really loved by the players as it gave Mercy a really strong effect in the game. Some people thought it was too strong, but to be honest, it's an arguable point. As we all know, Zenyatta can pop his ultimate and negate any incoming damage. Lucio can do something very similar, however they are kind of frontlining with the ultimate, but Mercy had her own place with the Resurrect ultimate. The twist was that if she managed to keep herself alive, she could dive in and completely turn the tables with a second team fight. Now don't get me wrong, I understand that the new ultimate with the resurrections in succession is still very good, but they kind of miss the mark in terms of how it feels. You still miss the satisfaction that a lot of other supports still have. Every single support has something big and effective in terms of creating some sort of anti-attack. Everyone but Mercy. My biggest issue is, however, that certain Mercy players would prefer to pocket someone, and the new Mercy changes kind of made this more prominent. Maybe I'm just talking with a heavy heart, as I am one of those players who does miss this ultimate versus the new one. Now, just keep in mind I am no game analyst or pro player, so take my opinion with a grain of salt and discuss yours in the comment down below. Enough with the crying though, and let's get on to the next one, which is D.Va's original defense matrix. Now this is obviously still in the game, but on July 19th, 2016 it did get a huge change in terms of how it works, and it effectively changed its use, and actually it made the ability better, at least objectively. Let me explain why. Basically, before, when you used to use your defense matrix, it simply activated a shield and it stayed like that for a set period of time before turning off and going on cooldown. This is very similar to how Genji would use his deflect. However, after the change, D.Va was given the charge meter and the defense matrix cooldown was lowered to 1 second. This is what allows D.Va to throw up her matrix, then put it down, but then throw it right back up, and it does allow her to make some more plays. I mean, overall it made it a little harder to actually block things, but it made D.Va mains adapt to a new playstyle that comboed with the rest of her kit in a very smooth way. D.Va players originally had to choose between exhausting the matrix as they flew towards the target or using it after they got there during the fight. But now they can use it for a bit while approaching the target to keep themselves protected, and then again use it to block incoming attacks during an engaged fight. It'll just be up to the D.Va players to get a good timing. Anyways, let's move away from D.Va and talk about everyone's favorite hero, Bastion. So there's actually two things to mention about good old Bastion. So first up is actually his original ultimate ability that was actually only heard of during very early development in Overwatch. The first concepted ultimate for Bastion was actually a remote mine in which Bastion would drive around an RC car before burrowing it into the ground and becoming a landmine. It would control similar to kind of how Junkrat's Riptire would, but instead of exploding, it would plant into the ground and sit there. Any enemies who walked over it would trigger the mine and explode. Now, in concept, it actually sounds very cool, like a very kind of strategic ultimate, but it never made it into the final game as it just didn't fit Bastion's character too well, and you know, I kind of second that. Imagine Bastion driving an RC car instead of becoming a tank. Doesn't fit too well. The second ability, however, was to do with Bastion during the beta stages, and a lot of you will actually know about this as it's very infamous and got very popular. It was Bastion's shield, in which when he was in turret form he could use the right click to deploy a shield for himself. This left a lot of Bastions just sitting in a corner, throwing up their personal shield and mowing down every enemy with ease. It was super OP and thankfully never made it out of the early beta. For our next character, we'll be looking over Torbjorn. Almost all of you will know of these as it's the most recent change that happened when compared to the rest of our list, but this was the Scrap Collector passive and armor pack ability that once existed in his kit. For those of you who don't know, the Scrap Collector was a passive that had Torb's own turrets drop scrap, and then Torb could pick them up to fill up a meter. He could hold up to 200 scrap, and then it would be consumed to use the armor pack ability. Each armor pack costed 50 scrap and would be dropped to give 75 armor to either you or an ally. It wasn't a bad concept by any means, and in some cases it was kind of cool. However, it wasn't super impactful and didn't give much to Torbjorn. The changes that gave him the new ability that we know today, Overload, is much more effective in giving Torbjorn his own footing and independence in the game. Last but not least, we'll take a look at Genji's bleed effect. This was a very early ability that was actually removed all the way back in November 20th of 2015. The bleed would be applied to enemies who got struck by his Swift Strike, this is his dash. It was replaced in favor of more upfront damage but less overall damage. I can understand why they did this, because in perspective, Genji is an assassin. So even if he has less overall damage, it's still better for him as a character because he needs to get in and assassinate a target and then use the reset to escape. The bleed effect would prolong the kill and leave him stuck for longer. With that being said, I have to admit the concept is so cool, and thematically it fits both him and the ability so perfectly. I wouldn't mind seeing something like this be re-implemented for a different hero, or even back into Genji's kit, but in a very subtle way that's not intrusive but adds an awesome thematic touch. With all that being said, that does just about wrap up the video for today. It was a little bit of a longer one, but I hope you guys did enjoy it, and you may have known most of these, but if you still did enjoy it, then why not hit the like button and subscribe for future content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.